can barely even smell this thing. I'm really happy to be here with you this evening. Thank you so much for having me, Alliance members. Not only have I had a really enjoyable conversation at my dinner table tonight, but since about 4:30 this afternoon, I've actually been craving pancakes, and I decided that tomorrow I'm going to go get some pancakes. And Daryl said, free pancake day tomorrow at IHOP, so I think I'm going to choose there. So for no other reason, I'm so happy that I found out that information. I'm like, it was meant to be that I'm here tonight. What I'm going to do tonight is I am going to speak with you guys a little bit about my own history and my background and how I got to where I am today. And then from there, I'm going to introduce to you guys one of the tools that I have found to be very helpful. This is a tool that I have learned along the way in my journey, and offer it to you guys in depth so that you guys can use it yourself. I came from a family where I didn't have the best start. I came from a dysfunctional family. My father was an alcoholic, and my mother was a very unsupportive person, a work addict, a rageaholic, all kinds of things, physically abusive. My father committed suicide when I was 12 years old, and on top of that, we moved every couple of months growing up, so I had very few friends or family members with whom to develop relationships and develop trust and predictability in the world. And so it was this terrible time for me in my life, being that young and having all of these terribly traumatic events happening for me as a child. And what this resulted in for me was having this sort of one-down self-esteem where I felt like I was inherently less than other people, and I tried to assuage my pain using any kind of activity that I could, or drugs or alcohol that I could. And so it was a really tumultuous time. I actually started skipping school when I was in first grade. I thought it was my own novel idea. The school bus would come by, and I realized sometimes I don't stand out here in the school bus, because I'm sick or something. I'm like, maybe if I just hide, and I would just go off on my own and just be safe by myself all day, and then come home, and I thought it was my own original idea. So it's just definitely an interesting period of my life. But then I had the good grades while I was in school and getting my education. I had lots of teachers encouraging me. I'm blessed to have a high IQ, and so I excelled in school, and I did very well in school, and I had the encouragement of my teachers. And I remember when I was in 9th grade, I had my science teacher say to me, maybe you should do biology when you're in college. And I thought, me? Go to college? Isn't that for smart people? So I ended up actually moving out while I was in high school still, and going to college on my own, and it was great because I excelled in the environment of working and going to school at the same time. I became a really high achiever, and this helped me very much to actually build my esteem, because now instead of feeling inherently flawed and defective, I was valuable, I was worthwhile. And so I lived in Huntsville, Alabama at the time. I ended up working with NASA, doing business development and being a flight controller for the space station for several years, and really turned my life around. I got sober when I was 21, and didn't do any sort of self-destructive activities, but instead really decided to build a life for myself that I liked. However, it was still something was a little bit missing, because what I was actually doing was, instead of having true self-esteem, I was really having other esteem. I was valuable because I had this great job. I was valuable because I made good grades. I was valuable because of all these things that I could do as a person, instead of actually being inherently worthwhile. And somehow I got into yoga and meditation, and that started me on this journey for inward reflection. And the journey for inward reflection continued for me when I moved out here to Colorado, And I didn't have all the things that I had been basing my esteem upon. And I got into these spiritual programs, as well as therapy, and as well as reading books, in order to say, I need to change my life differently. Because I knew that I had these big T traumatic events from my childhood that I said, I'm willing to go to any length to make sure that I'm functional and healthy and to not repeat the cycle, as well as to live the best life that I can. And I knew that it was warranted based on my history. So that brought me to a place where I started to build this tool bag of lots of different resources that I could use in order to go into and say, is this healthy? Is that healthy? How do I manage this situation in life? How do I manage that situation in life? And so now I have this entire tool bag that I've carried around with me in order to become an emotionally and spiritually mature person, in order to become a healthy, functional person. And then what happened was actually pretty strange, because while I lived a lot of my life kind of on one side of the spectrum of being not so mature and not so healthy and not with the best tools, then suddenly I swung the pendulum to the opposite extreme, where it was like, compared to the average person, I actually seemed a lot more mature, a lot more healthy, a lot more functional. And I realized I'm so very grateful actually for these concrete, like egregious traumatic events that happened in my life, because they led me to really know that I had to learn these tools to self-evaluate. And that if I wanted to increase my self-awareness and my self-reflection and really become a mature person, that I had to do it. And what I realized is that the average person actually doesn't do that. So what ended up happening for me was that I eventually left my job. I was an engineer, and I left my job, and I've had my own business as a coach for a while, offering these tools to other people. Right now, I am in front of you guys with, a limited amount of time, and I've had to ask myself, what's the most valuable thing that I have that I can bring to someone in a short time frame? I'm no longer coaching right now. I got married, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. And I got married to a man who has 4 children from a previous relationship. And so that has consumed a lot of my time. And then I'm also now 4 months pregnant. And so I have quite a lot going on. And I've stopped my coaching business. I'm writing a book right now on how to reparent yourself, but it's not written yet, so I'm not trying to sell you guys on that. But I really had to ask myself, what's the most valuable thing that I can give this audience with my time here today? And with the Kiwanis mission of to serve the children of the world, I personally believe that the thing that we can really start with is increasing our own self-awareness, increasing our own self-evaluation, and then modeling that through our relationships with other people. That's the greatest gift that we can give each other. I want to give you guys an example of buying a house. What's the right way to, maybe not buy a house, but to say, put an offer on a house? I would argue that there's a right way, a right decision-making process for doing that. What would you do, right? If you say, oh, there's this house that I see that I want to buy, you probably get some objective data. You look at the market value of houses in the area. You maybe get on Zillow and say, when did it last sell? How much did it sell for? And then what you would do is you'd look at the individual attributes of the house and you'd weight them appropriately for your value system. Maybe there's no fenced-in backyard. And for you, you're like, that's great, that's worth an extra, couple grand for me. But then the next person over might say, well, no, I have a 3-year-old son, I need a fenced-in backyard, I'm going to deduct some. But there's a right process, nonetheless. There's like this more functional process that you could actually go through in order to come to a number, and it's going to be different for everyone. There's no one right answer, but there is a right process for how we could actually make a decision or to think about this. I would argue the same thing is true when it comes to evaluating the way that we think and the emotions that we feel. while we all think very different thoughts and we all feel very different things, I would say that there is a right process, a more functional process for how we can actually evaluate what we're thinking and what we're feeling, even though it's all going to be very different. Let's just pretend for a moment that I am sitting in my living room and my husband comes in through the front door, and the front door swings open with a lot of force and then closes with an abrupt force, and my husband doesn't look at me as he passes through the living room, and he has a crinkle right here, and then he goes down into the basement and that door opens with a lot of force and shuts with a lot of force. That's interesting. So I might think to myself, oh my gosh, he's had a bad day at work. He's really upset. I need to leave him alone, right? Or I could think, well, gosh, did I do something wrong? I can, I don't know what, did I do something to piss him off? All of a sudden I start going through, let me think about all the emails of tasks, items that I sent him earlier. Was there anything in there that was inappropriate or would have, struck a nerve with him? And the emotion I would be feeling is fear. Or it could be such that because of who I am as a person, I might think, oh gosh, maybe he's not in love with me anymore. Maybe he's, becoming disinterested in me or something. So depending on who I am as a person, I'm going to take this same exact event and interpret it a million different ways, correct? Of course, there is some objective data. Maybe I know my husband kind of well, and this is a typical thing. After work, he just needs a little bit of time. But we can think about the objective data, and then we can also think about our own history and our own experience and how that plays into the emotions that we're feeling and the thoughts that we're having. The same thing can be true for your boss. Your boss could say to you, like I've had my boss say to me before, sitting down with you in a meeting is like we're talking over coffee. And I could take that remark and I could say, why how dare you say that to me? And I could feel this sense of anger and make up that he's being critical of me in some kind of ill fashion. Or I could actually make up that, oh, well, he's giving me some feedback that maybe he's joking around and trying to be loving and kind. It's really up to me, the thoughts that I have, and then the thoughts that I have then therefore generate the emotions that I'm experiencing. Is this striking a chord with any of you guys? Do you guys agree that the way that we're thinking and the way that we're feeling can actually be very subjective to who we are as people? That the same exact event, if it happened to me versus happening to my friend, could have completely different thoughts and emotions associated with that. So the thing is, we're actually powerless over that piece of the process. We're powerless over the automatic emotions that happen when data comes in, some objective data comes in, and the interpretation that we give to that in just a millisecond time frame. We interpret it, and then we have these thoughts about it, and then we have this emotion about it. We're completely powerless over that, and that's absolutely fine. But what we're not powerless over is examining the thinking that goes behind that and asking ourselves, is that how we want to be thinking about this? I have a beautiful example that I'm going to give you guys that a friend of mine had, where she asked her husband to hang up a Christmas card. And he had this look on his face as soon as she asked him this. And she immediately made up that he didn't want to hang up this Christmas card. And she started feeling all these feelings of, what about, you're not wanting to help, but here's me, it's Christmas time, I'm doing all this work, and suddenly feeling unappreciated, feeling anger and pain. I'm angry that you don't want to help, and I'm feeling pain that you don't appreciate me. And then we can actually stop, if we can watch the process, if we can watch all this, if we have the awareness to watch, to say, oh, this data came in, and these are the thoughts that I'm having, and these are the feelings that I'm having, we can actually pause, and we can actually say, well, what part of this is true? Is this story true that I'm making up? And then from there, that gives us freedom, that gives us many different options to move forward in a more functional way. And this is where I go back to saying that this is the superior process, the superior thinking process, is if we can watch what we're making up every step along the way, and then realize that we're having these thoughts that are coming up, and these emotions that are coming up, and then possibly halt ourselves and pause before we have behavior, right? Because then what do we want to do sometimes? Well, now my husband has gone downstairs, and I'm going to go take his dinner and throw it in the trash and say, that jerk. You know, when I don't even know if the story I'm making up is true. You know, maybe he just maybe he just ran over a dog outside. You know, I mean, there's a million other stories that I could make up that could be just as true and or not true as what I'm making up. But before I take an action out of these emotions and these thoughts that I'm having that might not be true, if I can watch that process and question that and examine that, then I have a lot more freedom, a lot more functionality in the choices I make behaviorally. So what I'm going to do is I am going to give you guys a handout that's actually going to have, that actually has a fill-out portion for you guys to try a little exercise on for size. You can see if there's a neighbor who has a pen that you could borrow in case you don't have it. And we'll all just give it our best shot for right now and to see if we like it.
While you're passing that out, I have a thought. Is it emotion comes first or the thought that comes first?
So, I personally believe that it's the thought that comes first, and then it's the thought that then creates the emotion. However, for me personally, I have a hard time noticing the thought before the emotion. I can very easily say, right now, this is the emotion that I'm experiencing. And then from that, I can backtrack and then be like, okay, so what data happened, what objective data happened, and then what is it that I'm obviously making up that is leading to this emotion. But I would actually say that what happens first, within that split second, is the thinking happens first, but it's very subconscious.
Okay.
And then from there, the emotion is generated. But for me, I recognize, first all I know is I'm angry, and I'm like, wait, what is happening right now? And then that's actually why what I have here, if you guys flip over to, you can look up whatever you want, but what I have here for number one is labeling the emotion, because that's what's easiest for me. Some people could probably start to label their thoughts more. So I'll give you an example here though. If we could actually go to the page that has it filled out. So there's the beginning part, which just gives you an example of how the feelings create the behavior, and the thinking creates the feelings and the behavior. And then I give you some basic emotions to choose from. And then there's the filled out portion of this. So this has the example of my friend that I told you about that went to hang up this, asked her husband to hang up a Christmas card. But if we take this down and we say, okay, number one, label the emotion. The emotion is I'm feeling anger and pain. Or it could be one emotion. And then we can go back and say, oh, what happened right before this? Oh, this happened. And I told him to do this, and then I saw his facial expression, and now I'm feeling these emotions. And then I can say, oh, what am I making up about that? What I'm making up is that he doesn't want to participate and he doesn't appreciate me. And then I can we'll go into number 4 here, which is examining the thinking. Is that story true? And all 1 through 4 here are all just within ourselves. So is this story true? And are there other stories that could be true? Could it be perhaps that when he made that face, he was actually just thinking, how am I going to hang up this Christmas card? Right? Very, very easy and simple other story to come up with. So there's the next piece to this, though, is that this is optional, because sometimes this requires us to be vulnerable and to move into intimacy with other people, which is, I'm making up X. Is that true? Now that's a very vulnerable thing, to start telling people, to show people what's going on inside of our own brains. That's letting people into ourselves. That's intimacy, intimacy. So we could say here, in this thing of, when I saw your facial expression, I make up that you don't want to help. Is that true? And then we could also even say, sometimes we might even have a request from someone else and say, what I would prefer in the future is X, Y, or Z thing, which isn't really super applicable in this example. But there is one thing that I do want to differentiate here. Let's pretend for 2 seconds that for between number 4 and number 5, as you fill this out, there's a difference between whether or not you need to take an action for yourself, or whether or not you might actually have a request of someone else to do something different. In this example, the action would really just be for the person who made up the story to have a different behavior or just pause or something. But there might even be times where we actually have a request of someone else and we say, I would prefer that you don't call me past 5 p.m. Right? Because maybe I'm really busy after 5 p.m. You can call me all day, anytime between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. and don't call me past 5 p.m. And that may be a request that we make of someone else. But then the action that we can take is to say, when and if my phone rings after 5 p.m., I won't answer it. So there's a difference there. There's a difference between a boundary that we have for ourselves and a request that we're making of someone else. So just take a couple minutes and give this your best shot. Maybe something that happened at work recently or something that happened in your family life. And just try to go through this process a little bit. We'll just take 3 minutes or so, 5 minutes possibly if you guys want it. And just see how it goes for you. And I'll just be here in case you guys have any questions or comments or suggestions. Sometimes it can be hard to think about what example to use for yourself here, but I would go back to a time recently when you felt a very strong emotion. Because sometimes it could even be good. Maybe something very joyful happened and you felt some great, some very positive emotion, and it's because you made up a very positive story. dissect, maybe someone can share their example, or what do you guys think?
I have a question about this process.
Yeah.
The number 5, the intimacy part of it, and vulnerability. How do you decide whether or not you want to go to number 5?
I think for most people, it's a kind of a slippery slope. First of all, you have to be not so deep into the emotion anymore, because sometimes it can be really easy to say, my request is that you never do anything that makes me feel uncomfortable ever. For example, you could say to your partner, I never want you to make a face ever again that I could interpret as your disapproval, which would be ridiculous, right? However, if you come to the point of saying, I can make up lots of different stories and I still can't really have peace or serenity until I get the actual data confirmed, then that would be an appropriate thing. And I would definitely say that the first piece of that is usually pretty applicable, to be able to ask someone else, this is what I'm making up, is that true? Right? Because it's just part of gathering more information. But the slippery slope is when you move into the request, because more often than not, we need to look at whatever our part is and try to change it and just accept other people for how they are. We can definitely make a request or make a preference, but that can be, especially if we're in the emotion, then that can be a slippery slope, and I would definitely wait a little while and have sat upon all of your other options first.
So you might want to do number 5 after some time has passed?
The request piece of it, yeah. Although what I have found is the more that we start to do this, the more that this process happens. It's just like buying a house. Like, I'm pretty sure that most of us agree the process I formulated for how we would put an offer on a house seems like the most logical and rational, and that's probably how most of us would put an offer on a house today, right? But the thing is we're not doing that very often. This right here, we can do this, we can start doing this every moment of the day almost. Oh, here, this guy smiled at me, I'm gonna smile back, I feel joy, I'm making up that, life is great or whatever, right? Like literally every single emotion that we experience, it's because we're assigning meaning to data. And I have found that with myself personally and with a lot of my coaching clients, that they've gotten into this habit of, they can very easily tell when they're moving from a place of maybe more historical emotion, or needing to, or being kind of right-sized and being in a place where they can very easily say, what I would prefer in the future is, X, Y, or Z behavior from you. And also having the capacity to hear no, if that's the answer. So I find that this actually becomes an easier thing to get to 5, or maybe I say easier, but like a much shorter time frame to get to 5 as you continue to do the process more. Does anyone want to share one of their examples? Oh, here, we have a question.
Well, I think this is a very appropriate process. I got recently sandbagged by a colleague.
I don't know what sandbag means.
Snuck up on them. I'm a colleague who came and told me something that somebody else had done. And it triggered some immediate emotions. I don't think the colleague meant to do any damage, but the information they gave me wasn't correct. And of course it triggered some immediate anger. And being a person who likes to fix things quickly, I think that's a male trait. I started to react very, very quickly. But I also realized at the time the danger was inherent in moving too quickly. So I did discuss it with somebody else I trusted. who unfortunately gave me advice on how to proceed on this problem I had. But the saving grace was time. Just letting time elapse before I did anything. And the result was when I called the person who I thought had done something incorrectly and kept the discussion ratcheted down to a low level. It actually turned out to be very successful in that emotion didn't get out of control. Which it would have if the person had been there right in front of me initially. If I'd have been able to go through a discussion with the colleague to face the person that the colleague had been relating information, something bad might have happened. Certainly from emotional state. So these things do happen and do trigger automatically. Those stories do start getting created in your mind. Why did he say that? Well, he said that because he's trying to do something, undermine my position, da, da, da. And then it starts to get filled in because it sounds so rational. You can build that story very, very, very quickly, without too much, especially if you have some history with the individuals involved. The send key on the computer is the most dangerous thing there is, that send key. If they programmed it so you hit send and it wouldn't go anywhere in 48 hours, and come back. So you just want to send it.
Well, save as draft.
Yeah, I hate the send. But this is very true out of experience. I don't know how far back it relates to. I think people like to go that direction. But it's built in, some of that machinery is built in.
And what's your name?
Right.
Craig. I love what he's saying, especially because it reminds me as part of this process, just even having to go through when I'm in the middle of a very strong emotion. If I pause and like wait, and I label the emotion that I'm feeling, and then I go and I try to actually label the thoughts that I'm having, and then I start doing this thing about, well, what story am I making up, and is that story true? It actually almost inserts a pause, where before I do anything else, I go through this process. And sometimes just the pause, even by itself, even if I realize, no, like I'm right, this emotion is valid, this whatever, the story I'm making up is probably really true. You know, but before I at least start just reacting, I have had a pause, and it's almost like I've gone back into this logical part of my brain instead of this primal part of my brain that has all the emotions stored and wants to just, you know, my blood is boiling and I'm gonna react. So. Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that wants to share their experience? All right, okay, well, we'll wrap it up. So you guys can have these worksheets. I'm going to give you a call to action, and I would really encourage you within the next 24 hours to notice when you feel an emotion, whether or not it's positive or negative, joy or anger, no matter what it is. Go through this process, identify the emotion, figure out what thoughts you're having, what happened, what meaning you're assigning the data that's coming in, and just watch your brain through this process of what I made up about that was. And that's why I'm feeling this emotion right now. And then possibly, also, even when you're speaking to someone else, use that wording with someone else and have a little bit of intimacy or vulnerability with someone else, because as we start to use this process ourselves and we gain more awareness of ourselves, know thyself, and we can share that with other people and model that for other people, it allows other people to see that, you know, it's not that you made me feel angry when you did this. It's this happened and I made up something about it. And if we can share that in at least our own little circles, in our families and in our lives, to take responsibility for what we think and for what we feel and the meaning that we assign data in our lives, I personally believe that that is going to help all of us reach our greatest potential in life and have a much more emotionally mature and spiritually mature self that can reach whatever goals we want, no matter what age we are, no matter where we're at in life. And if we can take responsibility for this portion of things, that unleashes and unlocks a lot of potential for all of us. Thank you so much for listening and giving me your time tonight.
Thank you, Danielle, for sharing that. We have this to share with you.
Oh, thank you.
You got a smile, that's a good emotion.
Fred said that I should mention that we have a jar back here for our 100th anniversary, so if you feel inclined.
And I do have to call out the table to my left here because they brought their money and their sign-in sheets to me tonight. I wanted to commend them for that.
That was very nice.
That's the vulnerability there, buddy.
You're on that list. Have the winners tonight to announce Craig Carney? Yes. You want to Larry? Two? And the
Walk that back to me.
the big winner tonight, and I think we should disqualify these in the future that are all torn up and bent and everything. Rich Baker.
Whoa.
I can make very bad